What if I told you the final days of Freddie Mercury weren't just tragic? They were far more heartbreaking than the world ever knew. You've heard the music, maybe even the rumors, but what Freddie hid behind the spotlight will leave you stunned. From secret recordings to one final whispered message on camera, this isn't the story fans were ever meant to hear. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll see Freddie Mercury in a way that might just change how you remember him forever. Born Farrokh Bulsara on September 5, 1946, in the exotic coastal town of Stone Town, Zanzibar, Freddie came from a family with deep Indian roots. His parents, Bomi and Jair, practiced the ancient Zoroastrian religion and originally hailed from a quiet Indian town, then known as Bulsar. Even as a child, Freddie wasn't ordinary. He entered the world with 4 extra teeth, a trait he believed contributed to the vast range of his voice, one that would stretch from the Earth's depths to its highest peaks. And as fate would have it, being born under British colonial rule gave him a passport to a destiny few could imagine. He wasn't alone for long. When Freddie was 6, his younger sister Kashmira arrived. 6 years later, as political chaos took hold, his family's world would be upended. But before all that, there was music, school, and a spark that was slowly catching flame. At just 8 years old, his parents enrolled him in St. Peter's School, a rigid British-style boarding school nestled in Panchgani, India. Though the rules were strict and the environment cold, Freddie found something powerful: his voice and his identity. His headmaster recognized his gift early and urged his parents to pay for piano lessons. It was a modest investment with explosive results. Freddie didn't just play, he soared. He mastered the piano, acted in plays, dabbled in art, and earned a school trophy for Best All-Rounder by age 12. His classmates gave him the nickname Bucky because of his teeth, but Freddie wore it with pride. Around that same time, he joined his first band, the Hectics. They were just schoolboys, but the reaction they received was anything but childish. They played covers of Elvis and Little Richard, and the crowd, other students, responded with screams and applause. For Freddie, it was the first taste of a stage, and he liked the flavor. But things weren't always smooth. In 1963, after years in India, he returned to Zanzibar with a newfound confidence. A year later, the calm was shattered. Revolution erupted in the streets. Violence swept the island. The Bulsaras, like thousands of others, fled for their lives. Freddie was 17. They landed in Feltham, a dull gray suburb outside of London. It was a far cry from the vivid colors and warmth of Zanzibar. He'd gone from sunlit beaches to soot-covered streets, and for a while, he felt like a stranger in his own skin. But sometimes, transformation happens in silence. In that grayness, Freddie found direction. After finishing school, he enrolled in Isleworth Polytechnic, then moved to Ealing Art College. It wasn't just about art, it was a crucible for creativity, rebellion, and reinvention. That's where he met Tim Staffel, a fellow dreamer who shared his hunger for music. Together, they created edgy art, mocked the establishment, and imagined a world beyond the college halls. Ealing gave Freddie more than an education. It gave him a tribe. Outside the classroom, another obsession had taken hold. Freddie had discovered Jimi Hendrix, and it was like a door burst open. He didn't just listen. He studied him, drew sketches, watched his every move. Freddie didn't just want to sing songs, he wanted to become a force on stage, someone unforgettable. That energy led him to a small-time Liverpool band called Ibex. They weren't famous, but to Freddie they were a blank canvas. He joined them, learned their songs in 10 days, and added a few of his own. Then they performed in Bolton. It wasn't Wembley, but something magical happened that night. As Freddie stepped onto the stage at the Octagon Theatre, everything changed. He wasn't just performing, he was commanding. One bandmate later said, "We used to just play," but Freddie turned it into a show. Even with only one pair of pants and one shirt, he strutted like a rock icon. By October, he'd convinced the group to rename themselves Wreckage. Their music started to shift too. Freddie, along with guitarist Mike Burson, began writing songs with titles like Vagabond Outcast. One of them, Green, was recorded in Freddie's flat. Years later, it would resurface as a hidden treasure from his early days. Wreckage didn't survive long, nor did his next band, Sour Milk Sea. But Freddie didn't flinch. Each failed project was a stepping stone. He wasn't interested in imitating others. He wanted to create something completely original. As he once told his bandmates, "We're not going to make it playing all this three-chord blues stuff. We need to write our own songs." That mindset would change everything. Then came a twist that would alter music history. On March 29, 1970, Tim Staffel made a decision. He quit his band. The group he left behind had two remaining members, Brian May and Roger Taylor. What happened next would become legend. But that's a story for another time. Because before Freddie Mercury could become the legend we know today, he had to endure exile, embrace reinvention, and chase stardom through every alley of London's underground scene. And somehow, through every loss and every reinvention, he never lost that spark. It was already there, from the moment he sat at that piano in Panchgani, from the moment he turned his pain into power. And even in his final days, that flame refused to go out. They crossed paths in 1965, but when Tim walked away, it didn't take long for Freddie to step into the spotlight. It wasn't just a coincidence, it felt like fate tightening its grip. Smile already had potential, but Freddie brought a charge, something electric, something you couldn't look away from. Long before he joined, he was in the crowd at their shows, critiquing their performances with bold confidence. He wasn't a stranger to the stage, just a storm waiting to break. Roger Taylor once admitted he saw Freddie as more of a wild friend than a serious musician. But that perception flipped like a switch. Freddie had been ready for this all along. And once he joined the band, the air around them changed. He didn't want them to be just another rock band. He wanted them to be unforgettable. The stage had to be grander, the looks more theatrical, and the sound bolder, riskier, louder. He insisted on renaming the band Queen. Brian and Roger hesitated. It felt audacious, almost too grand. But Freddie was unmoved. He called it regal, powerful, universal. Even the controversy of the name excited him. Around the same time, he dropped Bulsara and became Mercury. A cosmic shift for a man who was transforming before their eyes. Still, they needed one final piece, a bassist who fit their wild alchemy. Several came and went, but none truly clicked, until John Deacon showed up in 1971. He was only 19, quiet, composed, almost invisible next to the flamboyance of Freddie. But he brought a custom-built amp to his audition, and that one move helped define Queen's sound forever. He didn't try to dominate. He simply played with precision, anchoring the band's energy without ever needing to outshine it. That's when the magic locked into place. Queen, as we know it, was born. But Freddie wasn't done crafting the band's image. He sat down with pen and paper and designed their now iconic crest. Lions, a crab, fairies, and a phoenix. Each symbol chosen with care, reflecting the band members' zodiac signs. He didn't just want a logo, he wanted a legacy. And in that grand emblem, Queen looked like royalty long before they were treated as such. Their early recordings happened inside Trident Studios, where legends like the Beatles had once recorded. But Queen weren't stars yet. They weren't given prime hours. They were squeezed into overnight graveyard slots, waiting in silence for their turn. They'd emerge at dawn, drained but determined. They clung to that first album like it was their lifeline. And then, the release got delayed. They waited. Months went by. When it finally dropped in July 1973, the response was lukewarm at best. Critics didn't understand it. Most people didn't either. But Queen didn't flinch. They weren't making music for the moment. They were building something meant to echo for decades. By 1974, they were still navigating their sound. Their first albums had brilliance, but they also felt scattered, like experiments that hadn't quite found their core. That changed with sheer heart attack. Suddenly, Freddie's musical identity crystallized. He tightened the arrangements, cut the fluff, and infused every song with drama and grandeur. Then came Killer Queen, and with it, a seismic shift. They weren't just climbing the charts, they were redefining what rock could sound like. The track lit up the UK and crossed the Atlantic. Queen had arrived. But here's the part no one saw. Behind the glam, they were broke. Trident, their label, took most of the cash. Queen were household names, but living like students. Freddie's flat was damp and dark, and John couldn't even qualify for a loan. Fame wasn't paying the bills. That's when they decided to fight back. After months of legal wrangling, they broke free. But freedom came at a brutal cost. Massive payouts and lost royalties. And just as they clawed their way out, they risked everything again. They dove headfirst into A Night at the Opera, their most ambitious, most expensive album yet. It was a roll of the dice, recorded across 7 studios, draining their newly won finances. They couldn't afford failure. Then Freddie unveiled a 6-minute epic, Bohemian Rhapsody. No chorus, no clear structure, complete madness. Radio stations laughed. But Freddie wasn't interested in approval. He made a video, low budget but unforgettable, and dropped it like a lightning bolt into the pop world. The gamble worked. The song ruled the charts for 9 weeks. Suddenly, everything changed. Freddie wasn't just a frontman anymore. He was a phenomenon. When he stepped on stage, it wasn't to sing, it was to command. His voice danced between thunder and velvet, and somehow he made every person in a sea of thousands feel personally seen. Even that mic stand he accidentally broke? It became part of the act, wielded like a sword. By the time Bohemian Rhapsody debuted live, the crowd wasn't attending a concert. They were witnessing a legend in bloom. Then came Bingley Hall in 1977. As the final note faded, something unexpected happened. The crowd began singing, "You'll Never Walk Alone." It wasn't planned. It wasn't rehearsed. But Freddie stood still, watching. That spark became an inferno. He turned to Brian and whispered, "We need songs for this." What followed were "We Will Rock You" and "We Are the Champions." Not just songs, but anthems that echoed across stadiums, arenas, generations. By 1980, Queen took another leap. Another one bites the dust. A daring left turned into funk. Fans didn't see it coming. Critics doubted it. But it shattered expectations, topping US charts. That's what made Queen different. They didn't follow trends. They created them. Freddie couldn't be boxed in. He kept evolving, kept surprising everyone. That's why his voice didn't just belong to one genre. It belonged to anyone willing to listen. Success brought extravagance. Freddie lived without restraint. If something caught his eye, he made it his. Lavish parties, opulent gifts, even opening stores after hours. He didn't wait for permission. His 39th birthday bash? Legendary. A cake shaped like a cathedral, over 700 guests, and enough crystal broken to fill a museum. But extravagance didn't always equal perfection. In 1984, Queen made a move that shocked the world. They performed in South Africa during a cultural boycott. The backlash was immediate. Fines, blacklists, protests. The band insisted it wasn't political, but the damage had been done. Even they later admitted it was a misstep. Then came a new challenge. In 1980, Queen jumped into film, scoring Flash Gordon. It wasn't typical Queen, few lyrics, heavy synths, and Brian May shouldering much of the load. Fans were puzzled, some were thrilled, others turned away. But this move hinted at a shift. Queen was heading somewhere new, and not everyone would follow. 2 years later, they pushed further with Hot Space, embracing funk and disco, igniting yet another storm. And just like that, the game changed again. The synths echoed like a foreign language. It wasn't the Queen the world remembered. Fans were confused, critics harsh, and behind the scenes, the cracks were turning into chasms. Freddie Mercury and John Deacon leaned into the experimental vibe, dancing through Munich nights and foggy recording rooms. But Brian May and Roger Taylor, they weren't on board. They watched Queen's identity melt into something unrecognizable. It wasn't just music anymore. It was a tug of war for the soul of the band. A creative implosion that left the band bruised, the fans divided, and the future uncertain. Still, in the wreckage, lightning struck. In a Swiss recording studio, Queen crossed paths with David Bowie. What began as casual riffing turned electric. Arguments flew, egos clashed. But out of that chaos, Under Pressure was born. That bass line? Pure Deacon genius. The vocal tension? Freddie versus Bowie. Emotion over perfection. It climbed to #1 with the kind of force that reminded everyone. Queen still had magic. They were unraveling, but somehow, brilliance still slipped through. By 1983, the damage was undeniable. Queen hit pause. For the first time in their history, the machine stopped grinding. Years of stadium shows, sleepless nights, and creative brawls had left them wrecked. It wasn't just burnout. It was identity loss. Freddie was chasing something freer. Roger and Brian wanted to hold the line. And Freddie's devotion to manager Paul Prenter only deepened the fracture. Yet silence has power. As the noise faded, memories came back. So did hunger for reinvention. Then came The Works in 1984. It was their lifeline. Freddie, flamboyant as ever, reignited the fire. Deacon brought rhythm back to the forefront. Roger and Brian strapped on their guitars like armor. The balance returned. Pop flirted with rock in a way that finally worked. Radio Gaga dominated airwaves. I Want to Break Free became a global anthem. But not without cost. When Queen filmed the video dressed in drag, the UK chuckled. But MTV balked. In the US, the video was banned. Some fans turned away. And in Rio, Freddie's bold stage costume was met with hostility. Objects thrown, cheers turned to jeers. America, it seemed, had moved on. But Freddie hadn't. He had something else to say. And he didn't need Queen to say it. In 1985, he released Mr. Bad Guy. It wasn't about commercial success. It was a declaration of independence. He poured his soul into every note, from tear-soaked ballads to cheeky disco pulses. He dedicated it to his cats, not critics. Some fans didn't get it. The US didn't pay much attention. But Freddie didn't care. This was his truth, unfiltered, untamed. And then came something that shocked even his closest friends. He reached across genres and asked opera legend Montserrat Caballé to collaborate. She said yes. Their first meeting in Barcelona? Freddie played her a demo with him singing both parts in falsetto. She was floored. The result, Barcelona, was a genre-defying marvel. When the song became the anthem for the 1992 Olympics, Freddie's voice soared through arenas he never lived to see. Their full album was strange, bold, and spellbinding. Live fully, invest in your passion, protect your art, and never let the world define your worth. Freddie didn't just leave money behind. He left a roadmap to fearless living. And there you have it. Fame, secrecy, heartbreak, and the final curtain call of a legend. Hit like, drop your thoughts below, and subscribe for more untold stories. Because Freddie didn't just live louder, he loved louder.